want to thank you for hopping on, number one. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be a member of the World Conference of Mayors. You're going to share a
Well,
little bit about that history as well. And so I'm going to pause because your history, I believe, is best shared with the person that I interview. So can you share a little bit about yourself?
about me? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Born in the great state of Alabama. I'm a southern son of the South. That's how I refer to myself. Grew up here in Tuskegee, Alabama. Um, Attended elementary school at the Washington Public School and on to Tuskegee Institute High School, which was founded by Dr. Booker T. Washington, and then scholarships to academic and football to Knoxville College in Tennessee, where I got involved in the civil rights struggle there. And I often say when we went to Knoxville, it was totally segregated. When we left there, it was totally integrated. As students, we were involved in that movement. But from there on to New York City, I was one of the few that not one of the few, but let me just say that I volunteered to sign up for the United States Air Force. Took the test, passed the test, but my results were not turned in because of a racist individual. I'll just leave it at that. I know how the Tuskegee Airmen felt now because many of them passed the test, but they were not able to go and fly and fight for their country because of racism. But I experienced that as well. But at any rate, I had always wanted to be a Tuskegee Airman growing up here, listening to the sounds of the airplanes flying over, and my father talking to me about his service to the country during World War II. But that's okay. I still had a chance to serve my nation, appointed by the Attorney General of the United States as the first African American state supervisor for the United States Department of Justice in Alabama. After my experience in New York City, I came back to the South and had an opportunity to serve my country in, as a as an official with the U.S. Department of Justice, fighting in the Civil Rights War. And indeed, it was a war during the 60s in our effort to integrate the schools and to integrate Alabama and to bring about justice and equality during that civil rights struggle. Served, as I said, with the Department of Justice and resigned from that position in April of 1972 to announce my candidacy to run for mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama. As a boy, I had said to some of my colleagues, you know, the mayor of this town must be a powerful dude if he can keep us from swimming in the swimming pool and playing baseball with in the public park. There was this big plaque on the entrance gates to the park that said Mayor Frank Carr. I said to my buddies, you know, one day I think I want to be mayor of this town so we can open up this park so that all of the children can swim and play. And they're doing that up north. We ought to be able to do that down south here too. Of course, you know, my my friend said, "Boy, you crazy. You can forget about that." But at any rate, 13 years old, same age that Emmett Till was slain in Mississippi. But I had that thought, and that's what I wanted to do. But I don't guess I really even took myself serious. But sure enough, I came back to the South serving with the Justice Department. And after the Justice Department, um, announced my candidacy to run for mayor, and sure enough, put together a Kennedy-type campaign, took the campaign to people, and got them excited about voter registration and got them involved in the voting process. Earlier, I had been the campaign manager for Attorney Fred Gray, and we elected him in 1970 as the first Black Democrat to the Alabama legislature since Reconstruction. Along with him, Thomas Reed, those first two. So I was involved in helping to elect them, helping to re-elect the first Black sheriff. And so I had helped to elect so many other local Black elected officials that in 1972 it was my turn. And so I was able to get the support of them as well. And sure enough, on October the 2nd, 1972, I had the opportunity to be sworn in as the first elected Black mayor in the history of Tuskegee, Alabama, the pride of the swift-growing South, the home of Tuskegee University, and the land of Dr. Booker T. Washington, Dr. George Washington Carver, birthplace of Mrs. Rosa Parks, home of flying, fighting Tuskegee Airmen. I remember Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory was a great comedian. He said, man, it's not like you were elected mayor of some little old raggedy town. He said, you were elected mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, the pride of the swift-growing South. And that's the way we feel about our city. And I have had the opportunity to serve as mayor of our city for 32 years and as a state representative representing our city in this area for 6 years in the Alabama legislature. Now have the opportunity to serve as a member of the legislative branch of government on the city council. I've also had the opportunity to serve as the ambassador for the state of the African diaspora. And so it has been a long and a good ride, over 50 years of public service as a public servant at the local, the state, the national, and the international level. And so I now have the opportunity to continue this effort as the founder of the World Conference of Mayors. So back to you, Kendra.
Thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of your history because there's so much you can get into. So here's my question to you. Let's talk about the history of the World Conference of Mayors. How did it begin? What sparked this? So many other organizations has actually been able to be birthed out of the World Conference of Mayors.
Yeah,
So can
yeah.
you share a little bit about that?
And that's an interesting point. Like the National Business League, founded in 1900 by Booker T. Washington, so many organizations have come out of the National Business League. The National Bar Association, the National Funeral Home Directors Association, the National Credit Union Association. I could go on and on. And so the World Conference of Mayors, too, has been the mother of several organizations, and we're still birthing, if you will, new organizations and new movements because the struggle goes on. But in 1977, Tuskegee, Alabama, and Banjul, the Gambia, after talking to my friend Alex Haley, and may he rest in peace, spoke to Alex, who came to our city. I said, Alex, I saw a sign at the meeting of the National League of Cities in Washington that said, wanted American cities to twin with Africa cities to establish sister city relationships. I said, what is this? They've got to advertise to get American cities to twin with African city, Tuskegee will be the first of many, I am sure, to take on this challenge. And so we stepped up to the plate and got in touch with Sister Cities International. And sure enough, we got a grant. First, let me just say that in a ceremony in New York City, Tuskegee, and Banjul, the Gambia. I don't know why we did it in New York, but I guess that's where they were attending the United Nations. But Tuskegee and Banjul, the Gambia, in the summer of 1977, signed officially. I signed with the mayor and the representatives from Banjul and entered into a sister city relationship between our two cities. Banjul is the capital city of the Gambia, where Alex Haley traced his roots to the village of Jufere, on the banks of the river Bang, the river Bang, the river in Banjul, the Gambia, and so the Gambian River is where all of that is located. So let me just say that we got a grant from Sister Cities to sponsor a trip to Banjul, the Gambia. I took as a part of my delegation the Dean of the School of Engineering, notice the Dean of the School of Agriculture from Tuskegee University, Dr. B.D. Mayberry, Dr. T.J. Pinnock, who was in charge of human resources and outreach for Tuskegee University, Dr. Peter Balogun, who is a Nigerian by birth, but a citizen of the United States and lived here in Tuskegee with us, and of course Major Holland, an esteemed architect here in the city of Tuskegee. But to make a long story short, we took a team to Banjul for the purpose of assessing their needs. We looked at their educational system, we looked at their housing, we looked at their infrastructure. We went to their central marketplace, which is the center of their economy. And so it was determined that we would try and do something to improve the central market. As all of you all know, the market place in any African city is the center of their business and commerce, where they bring all their goods and services, and the marketplace. That's it. So we looked at the average market, which was in need of so many things. They had no shelter. In many instances, they did not have the running water they needed. They did not have refrigeration, so the meats, they had the problem of spoilage there. And so we came back after looking at that situation. We came back to the U.S., wrote it up, submitted it to the World Bank, USAID, and sure enough, we were able to get funding to help improve the average market in downtown Banjul, the Gambia. And on another trip back after breakfast, Mayor George Monday, who was the mayor of Banjul at that time, as we walked and talked along the beach of the coast of Banjul, the Gambia, which has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, some of the nicest hotels in the world. It has been discovered by the Europeans and the Scandinavians because that's their favorite retreat. Many people from the U.S. and other places, I guess, don't know about Gambia's tourism. It is a pearl. It is a gem. But at any rate, Mayor Monday and I, we were walking along the coast, and I said to Mayor Monday, you know, it makes sense. African mayors and African American mayors working together. You see what we were able to do. We were not able to just talk about helping you. We were actually able to help you get some money to make some improvements. We were able to do something. You know, it makes sense. So why don't we think about, Mr. Mayor, since I organized in the United States, I was a founder and organizer of the Alabama Conference of Black Mayors, which grew into the Southern Conference of Black Mayors and the National Conference of Black Mayors. That's another story. But at any rate, I said to him, um, why don't we think about organizing an international conference of mayors with African mayors and African American mayors? You are a member of the Union des Villes Africaines. That's the organization of French-speaking mayors from across Africa. UVA is the name of those are the initials for their organizations. And I am a member of the National Conference of Black Mayors. And so we agreed that we would work to establish an international conference of Black mayors so that we could help each other. And then I said to him, as Africans and African Americans, we are not a part of the minority in the world. Why don't we, instead of trying to always join the European mayors and the World Association, they had an organization of international cities headquartered in The Hague, and we tried to join that, I think, and I'm not sure what success we had, but the point is, I said instead of us trying to always join these white organizations or majority organizations, um, why don't we organize a conference, because we're not a part of the minority in the world, we're a part of the majority, people of color. So let's organize not just an African American Mayors Association. Let's organize a world conference of mayors and invite others if they want to be involved in doing business with us. Because back in those days, in order to do business with Africa, you had to go through white folk to do business in Africa. It made no sense. You had to go through a third party. Later for that, we said, let's organize a world conference. And if they want to do business with us, we're in the majority, people of color. And so that was our attitude. He went back to the Union des Villes Africaines, that organization. I went back to the National Conference of Black Mayors. Both of us made a report and recommendation to our respective organizations. Both organizations passed resolutions agreeing to work toward this effort of organizing a World Conference of Mayors. We appointed working committees. We came together at a working session upon the campus of historic Howard University in Washington, D.C. And we took our bylaws from the National Conference of Black Mayors and took their bylaws from the Union des Villes Africaines. And from those two sets of bylaws, we shaped into being a new set of bylaws and laid the foundation for the World Conference of Mayors. And sure enough, I said, before we get this going, so that we'll not have any opposition to setting up this global organization, let's get the ambassadors on board. And so I set out to meet with the African ambassadors in Washington. I was making my rounds. I went to the Cameroon, the embassy of the Cameroon, met Ambassador Paul Pondy, and he said, Monsieur le Maire, instead of your going embassy to embassy, why don't you request to be on the agenda for a meeting of the ambassadorial conference caucus that we have here in Washington, which would give you an opportunity to speak to all of the ambassadors from Africa at one time. And sure enough, C. Payne Lucas, he's dead now, bless his heart, who was in charge of Africare, which was a very great organization in terms of helping Africa with many, many projects. He hosted the event. And so I contacted the ambassador from Egypt, the chair at the time. And he said, of course, we'd love to have you come. And so I came and made my presentation before the Council of African Ambassadors there in Washington. And they said, great idea. And it was such a great, Kendra, it was such a great idea that they wanted to adopt it as their own idea. So so I didn't, it was better to have them running interference and letting them think that it was their idea rather than have opposition from them. So the ambassador said, what we will do is we support this idea because it helps do what we have to do. We set the global policy at the highest level, but it must be executed and implemented where? In the cities and the towns, at the airports, at the ports, on the streets, in the communities, in the schools. And so you execute our policy. So it makes common sense. So the ambassador said, what we will do when you are ready to organize, and sure enough, during Black History Month in 1984, we had at least 19 ambassadors. We invited them. Mayor John Smith, the mayor of Pritchard, Alabama, invited them to come to his city for Africa Town to celebrate Africa Town. As you know, Africa Town is the last site that the last slave ship landed with Africans. By that time, in 1859, it was unlawful to bring slaves to the United States. But this ship landed at a place near Pritchard, Alabama, and it is historic because Africa Town now is still remembered and is still being commemorated. But at any rate, we had all of those ambassadors there. They came to Alabama. It was the first time you had that many ambassadors out of Washington. They were there. And Mayor John Smith was my Secretary General of the National Conference of Black Mayors. I was president then of the National Conference of Black Mayors. And so we had that event, and they came to Africa Town. That's how we got them out of Washington. I said, now we need you to come to St. Louis for the annual meeting of the National Conference of Black Mayors, because it is there on April the 20th of 1984 that we want to officially, at the meeting of the National Conference of Black Mayors, organize the World Conference of Mayors. And so, sure enough, once again, the ambassadors came and they did two things. One, they brought with them the mayor who was the president of the National Association of Mayors in their respective country. Okay? For example, Mayor Mamadou Jacques came from Dakar, Senegal. He was also the president of the Association of Mayors in Dakar, in Senegal. And we said the other option, if you can't bring the president of the Association of Mayors in that country, bring the mayor of the capital city. And so the mayor from the capital city of Cameroon, Mayor Ambassador Paul Pondy from Cameroon, of course, brought his mayor. So to make a long story short, we had 20 plus ambassadors there, and we had 40 countries represented, including Jamaica and across Africa. They were there, so they came. And there at that meeting of the National Conference of Black Mayors, I convened a separate meeting from the National Conference of Black Mayors. And at that separate meeting, we organized the World Conference of Mayors. I was elected as the provisional president of the World Conference of Mayors. Mayor William Snyder, the mayor of Monrovia, Liberia, was elected vice president, and his ambassador, Ambassador George Toe Washington, who had been one of the greatest supporters of this whole movement, was there as the ambassador from Monrovia, from Liberia, with his mayor Snyder. And so it goes on and on and on and on. And so we organized, and this April 20th will represent 40 years, Kendra, that we're celebrating. We're going to kick it off in Tuskegee, Alabama, and of course have the big ceremony and program during our August 20 through the 24th in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Hilton Hotel, along with the National Business League and the National Black Chamber of Commerce. The National Business League, remember I told you about that earlier with Booker T. Washington, who organized that organization. But at any rate, and so at the National Conference of Black Mayors, I was eligible to serve 2 more years, but instead I stepped down from being president of the National Conference of Black Mayors and stepped over to become the new president of the World Conference of Mayors. And I recommended as my successor for the National Conference of Black Mayors for the Honorable Marion Barry, the mayor of Washington, D.C., to step up and become president of the National Conference of Black Mayors. And so we had the 2 of us, Marion Barry, the same Marion Barry who was at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee, and head of SNCC. And yours truly, at the same time, I was in college at Knoxville College. So we were working together in the Civil Rights Movement in 1964. We were working together in SNCC. And now here we were now working together. First we were working together as students. Now we were working together as mayors of cities. Marion representing the city of Washington, D.C., president of the National Conference, and yours truly, president of the World Conference of Mayors. And so the 2 of us led the delegation in December of 1984 to organize the World Conference of Mayors to kick it off. We had already organized, but we were going for the first convention to be held in Monrovia, Liberia. So Marion Barry led the first part of the delegation because we were going to support him for the official sister city twinning ceremony between Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the United States, and Dakar, Senegal, which is the capital of the country of Senegal. And so we went and we had first that ceremony in Dakar, Senegal, where Marion Barry, representing Washington, and Mayor Mamadou Diop, representing Senegal. And so the 2 of them entered, and of course the president of the country was there to solidify all of this in Senegal. And then after the ceremony in Senegal, we boarded the plane, and just shows how protocol worked. We boarded the plane, and when the plane left the airspace, Marion Barry was still in charge of the delegation, and we boarded the plane, and the plane took off. And when we left the airspace of Senegal and entered into the airspace of Monrovia, Liberia, the transition of leadership for the delegation transferred from Marion Barry to yours truly, because now we were no longer on the sister city journey. We were now on the journey of the World Conference of Mayors. And so I took over in the airspace of Monrovia, Liberia. And when we landed in Monrovia, Liberia, okay, they met us at the airport, and there were hundreds of people at the airport. And then all along the road from the airport to the city of Monrovia, Liberia, 8 miles, people were lined up waving us and welcoming us. Thousands of people from Monrovia for the coming of the World Conference of Mayors. And when we arrived there, we were welcomed by not just the mayors, but we were welcomed by the president of the country of Monrovia, Liberia. And we had our first convention there in the convention hall, and I was elected president from provisional president to the actual presidency of the World Conference of Mayors. And so we were off and running. And the journey toward becoming a United Nations of Cities had begun. We adopted 5 basic principles at that time: trust, trade, tourism, technology transfer, twin cities. And since that time, of course, we've adopted 2 others: treasury and training, the 7 T's. But we were off and running with representatives from 40 countries from around the world for the World Conference of Mayors. At that convention, Mayor Snyder was our vice president. And I also, at that conference, we elected a number of vice presidents. And one of the vice presidents we elected was from the United States of America, from Monrovia. In Monrovia, Liberia, we elected a mayor from Alabama to become one of my vice presidents as well. And so we were off and running from that meeting. That's the beginning of the history of the World Conference of Mayors. From that point, we voted to meet in 1985 in the Bahamas, Nassau, Bahamas, hosted by the Prime Minister, because they don't have mayors in the Bahamas. Sir Penland hosted us in the Bahamas. And the next year, Mayor Harold Washington, who we helped to elect, hosted us in Chicago in '86. And then finally in '87, we were hosted in China, in the People's Republic of China. And on that route to China, we had a team of professionals with us who was going to help us introduce a new concept. And we asked, what is this new concept you're talking about, a new program and this new communication device program that you're about to introduce? He said, it's going to be called the internet. Can you imagine that? The World Conference of Mayors. Now we're involved in AI, but we were involved in taking to China the internet. And now look at the internet is everywhere. During our conference in Beijing, in the People's Republic of China. And of course, from there, we went on. From there, in '88, we were in Washington, D.C., '89 in Paris, '89 in Jamaica, '81 in Tuskegee, Alabama, '82 in Dakar, Senegal, and I could go on and on and on. Okay.
Let me share with you my follow-up next question. You've actually already answered, because I really wanted to talk about the 7 T's.
Okay.
And so you've actually done that. And so let's talk about another organization that was birthed out of your organizations.
Sure.
And let's talk about the historical Black towns and settlements and the history and how important that particular organization is in partnership alongside of the World Conference of Mayors. So could you share a little bit history about that as well?
Yes, one of our children, one of our associate organizations now is the Historic Black Towns and Settlements Alliance. At that meeting of the National Business League, which was founded in 1900, at the second meeting in 1901 in Boston, Massachusetts. Booker T. Washington asked Mayor S.L. Davis, the mayor of Hobson City, which was the first all-black historic black town incorporated in the state of Alabama in 1899. S.L. Davis was asked to give the keynote address. As all of you all know, Booker T. Washington was famous for establishing education. He started, as you know, he was the first president or principal of Tuskegee Normal School, which became Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University. But Booker T. Washington trained people to go start other colleges and universities. He sent Adams to start Grambling University, and I could go on and on. He helped Fisk and Howard and all of the other schools as well. So Booker T. Washington encouraged black people to establish their own historic black colleges okay? Now, at that same meeting in 1901, Booker T. Washington asked S.L. Davis, because he was the new mayor of a historic black towns, to encourage black people to establish their own historic towns. Why? Because, as you know, blacks were Jim Crow, blacks were being persecuted, abused, and killed and maimed and everything else during that time. So they needed to set up their own towns. So because there's strength in numbers for refuge purposes, but not only that, so that they could develop their own businesses, their own schools, their own communities. Black people we're the most progressive and the most talented people on the face of the globe. But our skills and our talents had been depressed by white people. Though slavery had ended, segregation just prevented us from flourishing and growing. So the whole idea was set up our own towns. And so so Booker T. Washington, through the National Business League, promoted that effort. And people went back from that meeting all over America and began to set up historic black towns. And of course, as you know, we have over 100 historic black colleges across. And so Booker T. Washington was involved in that whole movement. And as a result of that, we recognize towns like Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, which has its own post office, is a historic black settlement because we never incorporated as a town. But towns like Grambling, like Prairie View, like Langston, I could go on and on, Prairie View, black towns and black colleges, town and gown, working together, that movement. And so as a result of that, when I was reelected mayor of Tuskegee in 2012, we set out and held a meeting actually in 2013 where I invited the mayors of five, there were five of us, invited them to an organizational meeting after Mayor Alberta McCory, the mayor of Hobson City, Alabama, and Mayor Bruce Mount, the mayor of Eatonville, Florida. He's now deceased. May he rest in peace, Mayor Mount. But the two of them had been talking about this idea, and they finally said, let's stop talking about twin cities. They first started out talking about, let's have a twin city relationship between Eatonville, home of Zora Neale Hurston, and Hobson City. And so they said, let's stop talking about it and let's call Johnny Ford so we can do something about it. Okay, because they knew that, I like to organize. That's what I do. So they called me, and so it made a lot of sense. And so I took a trip down to Eatonville and met with black elected officials down there during the big game between Florida A&M University and Bethune-Cookman. That's the big classic. And at that time, that's when all the black elected officials would come together. And so I met with them. They said it's a great idea. And so to make a long story short, I hosted those mayors. I raised the money to bring them to Tuskegee and to host them. We met at the historic Kellogg Center upon the campus of Tuskegee University and at our office and headquarters at the municipal complex in Tuskegee, Alabama. And sure enough, in 2013, the idea became a reality. We organized a historic Black Towns and Settlements Alliance. The mayor from Hobson City, of course, at that time, we had Mayor Alberta McCory. We had Mayor Bruce Mount from Eatonville, and from Mound Bayou, Mississippi, Mayor Darrell Johnson, and from historic Grambling University, we had the mayor there as well. And so all five of us came together and we organized the Historic Black Towns and Settlements Alliance. Now that we were the five organizing towns, but our intent was to invite all of the historic Black towns and settlements to be a member of the organizations. If they were an incorporated town, wonderful. But if they were not, then they were a settlement. And as you know, Kendra, there are Black settlements all over America, across every railroad track, or down by the riverside, across town. Whether they're Black settlements, whether you're talking about Sweet Auburn district in Atlanta, that settlement that's within a town. If you're talking about St. Louis, I'm sure you got a Black settlement within the town, but you also have Black towns across the river. East St. Louis is a well, it didn't start out as a historic Black town, but East St. Louis now basically is one of our members and active organizations. And across the country, I could go on and on. But the historic Black towns, they have three goals that we have the 7 T's in the World Conference of Mayors and the 3 P's. And one day I'll work on expanding that to 7 as well. But the 3 P's: to protect, first of all, our history. And number 2, to preserve it. And number 3, to promote our historic history and culture of the Historic Black Towns and Settlements Alliance. You know, it was Booker T. Washington who first talked about a Black Wall Street, because we first had a Black Wall Street, if you will, in Tuskegee Institute, Alabama. Booker T. Washington promoted that. In Tuskegee, everything in Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, Black folk ran everything. When I went to Knoxville, Tennessee, that was the first time I went to a town where white people were in charge of everything. But in Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, we had everything. Black folk we had our own stores, our own dry cleaners, our own bakeries, our own automobile dealerships, our own drive-in theater, our own swimming pool, our own schools, our own churches, everything. Black folk ran everything. That was the whole concept. We ran it because we had the ability to run it. And Tuskegee Institute chose not to incorporate because instead, once blacks got the political strength, we said, don't worry about incorporating Tuskegee Institute. Let's take over the whole town. And so that's why we have one Tuskegee, Alabama, which now includes the Black settlement of Tuskegee Institute as a part of it. But we're in charge of the whole town. When I became mayor of Tuskegee, we not only had Tuskegee Institute, but we were also the home of the first Veterans Administration for Black Veterans, because Black veterans who had served in World War I came home injured, sick, and had no proper medical attention. And so here again, Tuskegee University, under the leadership of Dr. Robert Russell Moulton, took the leadership to petition the president, along with the NAACP, to establish a Black Veterans Administration hospital so that Black doctors and Black nurses could practice and take care of our veterans. And so in 1923, 101 years ago, we started the VA hospital. And so all of that now is a part of the Tuskegee complex. The city of Tuskegee, Tuskegee Institute, and Tuskegee University, and the VA hospital, which I'm now fighting to have declared as a National Historic Site. Because in Tuskegee, we have the Tuskegee Institute National Historic Site, we have the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site, and now we're working to establish the VA hospital as a National Historic Site, because the VA hospital was to Blacks in medicine what the Tuskegee Airmen program was for Blacks in aviation. And so both Blacks in medicine and Blacks in aviation, we have the foundation right here in Tuskegee, Alabama. Don't get me, you didn't ask me to start talking about.
No, let me tell you what I love about interviews. This particular interview, you're actually showcasing what's about to come, because there's going to be multiple of interviews behind you that is
Yes,
connected inside of the World Conference of Mayors. And so what we're doing, you're laying the foundation.
yes,
And
ma'am.
so you're doing an amazing job. I want to thank you for that. And I know we're about to celebrate 40 years of the World Conference of Mayors being in existence, and
Yes,
also helping on a local level, a national level, and now and an international level, because you've done that in the past and even currently. So let me ask you this quick question. How
thank you, ma'am.
can someone watching or even listening could help the World Conference of Mayors?
Well, we welcome that. The World Conference of Mayors, first of all, has 4 classes of membership. We are made up of elected officials, such as myself, and we are also made up of former elected and appointed officials, because a lot of times, uh, once you are no longer elected, they want you to go away. But no, uh, we want to keep those mayors and other elected and appointed officials who have experience and knowledge and who still want to be involved. So the World Conference of Mayors is unique. We are an organization made up of elected, presently elected, and former elected and appointed officials, as well as those who want to become elected and appointed officials. And so we have uh, non-elected officials sitting around the table, leaders who are heads of organizations who are involved in education, in business, in commerce, in science and technology, whatever. If you want to be active in an organization that has 7 goals, the 7 T's, they are trust, because that is so important, particularly if you when I say trust, we're concerned about trust because that's the first thing you need in order to do business internationally and deal with people from around the world. They need to be able to shake your hand. They need to be able to look you in the eye. They need to be able to trust you and have confidence. They need to understand your culture and you understand their culture. And so that's why we focus on trust, building trust first among each other, because the thing that can tear down a relationship quicker than anything else is mistrust, and people not trusting one another, not dealing in good faith and honesty, and that's what this is all about. So that's why trust is our first T, and we invite people, particularly those of you who are in the ministry or in the religious or faith business, we welcome you as well. Those of you who are concerned about building trust in communities, uh, whatever. So that's the first T. And then trade. We're involved, and we want to see Black people in particular be involved in importing and exporting. The World Conference of Mayors once had a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce called Export Now. We want to see Black folk and business people in the United States do business in Africa. And we don't want to have to go through anybody else like we used to back in the day. To do business in Africa, you had to go through white people to do business in Africa. Can you imagine that? Plus, you had to pay all people to do business. No, 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 no. Those days are gone. We do business directly. That's why we are working with Prosper Africa, which is established by the United States government, the Biden administration. Prosper Africa, their sole business is to help for Black people in particular, but to help business in the United States do business in Africa. And at our conference, we just met with them in Washington, and they're anxious and they're looking for people in the U.S. to do business in Africa, and they will help you. Okay, so that's why trade is our number one, is our number two issue. We want trade. We want folk to do business. We want you to make some business. We're tired of sitting back and seeing all the Europeans and people from England and everywhere. There are more white people in Africa doing business than anybody. And you got Chinese all over the place. The Chinese think they own Africa. The point I'm stressing is people from India, everywhere, doing business in Africa. And the Africans want to do business with African Americans. So the whole idea of trade is to open up the opportunities so that we can do business. Technology transfer. Now here we are. We were dealing with the internet, as I told you. We were involved in the beginning back there. Al Gore says he was involved. You know, he not say he was involved initially, but we were there in the beginning of the internet. In that first meeting, we were in China, in Beijing, but we were able to kindred like we're setting up now. I see you and you see me. But we had all kinds of boxes and and machinery set up. Right now, you know, we just have a phone and a computer, simple computer, but we had all kinds of things set up. But we had it set up at that meeting where we could talk to Tom Bradley, who was the mayor of Los Angeles at the time. We could see Harold Washington, who was the mayor of Chicago at that time, and he could see us. He could see me and the mayor of Pritchard, and the mayor of the other cities who were there with me as a part. Mayor Unita Blackwell, who was the mayor of Myersville, Mississippi. All of us, we were there in China, and that was a primitive form of the internet back then. But look at it now. So I don't have to tell you how far it has grown. Now we're dealing with AI, and we're on the cutting edge. At our meeting, as you'll remember, Kendra, in Orlando, we had the first presentation from the representatives from AI. Now they're in my city, and I'm working with them to establish a plant here, a business here, so that they'll be able to produce their iPods or their whatever they're going to produce. They'll be able to produce it right here in my city. The machinery and the mechanisms and the mechanism that will be used to promote and to expand AI as a new technology. We want to be on the cutting edge for the good and to look out for the bad, to make sure that ethics is involved throughout this whole process and throughout this effort. So technology transfer, that's, we have people involved in the World Conference of Mayors in agriculture, teaching people how to grow food and produce food, which is a major issue on the coast of Africa. I said in my speech that we must, through technology, halt the spread of the desert. We must plant and grow crops so that crops will grow, so that hungry children can be fed, and tears of joy rather than tears of pain will appear upon the faces of the hungry children of the world. And so we in the World Conference of Mayors must contribute through technology this effort of producing food so that Africa and the developing countries can be fed. That's a top priority for us, and it still is, because in talking to our African brothers, food is still a top challenge. Our good friend Lionel Richie, as you know, we all grew up here in Tuskegee together, and he went on with the Commodores. But Lionel Richie organized, that special program, "We Are the World," that concert that brought together entertainers from throughout the entertainment world, and they produced that program, that film, "We Are the World," which motivated so many people around the world to address the crisis of hunger that existed then and it still exists. And we in the World Conference of Mayors are still involved in that. And then we come to tourism, which is important to encourage people to come and visit our cities. And tourism is a big industry. In Alabama, our second largest industry. Across the world, in Gambia, they have Kunta Kinte and Roots. People come from all over the world for the Roots Festival. In Eatonville, they have the Zoanel Festival in Eatonville, tourism. In Tuskegee, we're getting ready to do the George Washington Carver Festival. In our historic towns, we have attractions which invite tourists. So we promote tourism as a major one of our T's. And then treasury. We say treasury because whether we talk about bitcoins, whether we're talking about dealing with the Federal Reserve, we're talking about monetary policy, we're talking about mayors learning how to float bonds and deal with Wall Street. As you know, the World Conference, we were there to open. I was involved in ringing the bell on HIV/AIDS Day in New York City, the NASDAQ. So when it comes to monetary policy and dealing with treasury and money, mayors must be involved in that process. Why? Because mayors must find other ways rather than just taxing the people all the time to generate money to run their cities and their towns. Okay, so that's why we have treasury as one of our T's, because mayors will forever be involved in monetary policy and procedures. And then, of course, we have training. It is a training process. I want this World Conference of Mayors to go on, to continue, to be institutionalized. And so that's why we're training young people to take my place and others to carry on this tradition. Kendra, we are so happy to have international youth organizations working with us. Crossroads Africa is one of the programs we're involved in. Queen Mother Blakely has a team of young people who are involved in this effort. But we invite those out there who are interested in leadership, and we're about leadership. We're about developing the capacity of leaders, tomorrow's leaders, to have the capacity to lead, to produce, and provide the kind of leadership that will result in improving the quality of life for people, because that's what this is all about. We were involved in the HIV/AIDS effort nationally. They called together a national meeting in Atlanta of national leaders. I was there with Nancy Wilson and so many others there from around the country who were there, the mayor of Atlanta and others who were there. And I said, you have all these national leaders here. How many mayors do you have involved? Because we were in Atlanta, but the mayor of Atlanta was not actually at the meeting. So I said, where are the mayors? I said, how do you hope to have a successful campaign in the fight against HIV in the cities of America without the involvement of the mayors? And so I volunteered to head the mayor's effort. And so along with religious leaders like Reverend T.D. Jakes and others, C. Virginia Fields, who was the borough president prior, as the borough president, was the borough president of New York, and Deborah Fraser House, who was who called together all of us later in New York City, first in Atlanta and then New York City. And so we had a national effort to combat and urge the administration and the CDC to do what they need to do to fight HIV/AIDS in America. And much progress, as you know,
Yes.
has been made against and in that fight. And then we've continued that fight now when COVID became a crisis. And once again, the mayors took a leadership role, because as mayors, I was the first to take the COVID test to show to our citizens that you should not be hesitant to do so. Mayors must lead in the fight to make their cities healthy. That's what it's all about. And so that's what we do. We train mayors for leadership roles in the World Conference of Mayors. So we have trust, trade, tourism, technology transfer, Twin Cities, Treasury, and training people for the future. That's what we're all about. And so I welcome others to join us. My email, and maybe you can put it in the chat. I don't know if you can chat, but you can put my email in. You can put my phone number in. We welcome you to join us. We welcome you to make contributions to the World Conference of Mayors. You can do that as well. We want you, okay? We want your service. We want your brain. We're part of Africa's brain bank, because we want the best brains and the best minds, not only serving Africa, but serving the rest of the world. Okay? Some of the you forgot. I forgot to tell you about some of the other organizations that's come out of us. The Historic Black Towns and Summits you've heard about. Yeah. We also have the National Policy Alliance, which I also am a co-founder of the National Policy Alliance, which is made up of the presidents of the National 9 Black Public Policy Organizations, the Congressional Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, the National Black Caucus of County Officials, the National Black Caucus of School Board Members, Blacks in Government, which represents 3 million Black government employees who execute public policy, the National Bar Association, Council, which represents judges who are our judicial conscience, if you will, and of course the World Conference of Mayors and the African American Mayors Association, which represents Black mayors in America. So that is the National Policy Alliance, which will be meeting during the Congressional Black Caucus. And so I'll just stop there.
What I will say is, for anyone that's listening or even watching this particular interview, what you've just given was a roadmap to how far we came to where we currently are. And
Yeah,
you're exactly right. We're looking for the brain banks of the future that's coming.
yeah.
And we want them to join the World Conference of Mayors. And so with that, it's been an amazing interview. Do you have any final remarks? Of course, your contact information would be made available. And along with that, the ability to sit with you and to spend this time with you, for you to be a part of history within itself, to spend time here and to share your journey. We're extremely appreciative of that. And for all of the interviews that's going to come behind you, you've laid the foundation, like I said before. So are there any final remarks?
No, I'm proud to have you, Ms. Kendra Phipps, for you have brought to our organization a high level of technology and communication, which is so important. So many people do not know about the World Conference of Mayors or know that we do welcome them and want the world to be a part of us. Our goal in establishing a United Nations of Cities is for the purpose of carrying out the global policies adopted by the United Nations at a global level. They're at the global level, we're at the local level. And what we do is we carry out those global policies in our cities and our towns. And so we welcome you. Kendra, you've developed an excellent web page for us. They can go there and also find out how they can join or contribute to the World Conference of Mayors, right? By going to our web page, which is
www.worldconferenceofmayors.org. And it also will be inside of the description of this particular video. And also we'll make sure that everyone has access to the links and your telephone number as well. So Mayor, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this first interview. So you're laying the foundation for all of the other organizations and black towns and settlements. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
point of special privilege before we go. Let it be known that today we adopted a resolution unanimously, the World Conference of Mayors and the Historic Black Towns and Settlements, calling upon President Biden and this administration to intervene in the crisis in Haiti. Haiti belongs to us and we belong to Haiti. Haiti, the first Black free nation, still is a symbol of Black accomplishment. And even though Haiti now is in crisis, Haiti is worth saving. And we are committed to the redevelopment of Haiti as a country of great pride, a country that we can all look to with pride. And so we now need the United States of America to step up to the plate and do something to help Haiti. And we were in Washington last week, meeting at the White House. We're going to now be back in touch with the White House and the administration and let them know we want our administration to do something about Haiti. Yes, we have a crisis at the border of the United States in the West, but we also have a crisis in Haiti. And we want the United States of America to take some action to help Haiti. Okay? Thank you, Kendra.